Hey guys, welcome back to Malt Mondays. So this week I am reviewing the Highland Park 18-year-old. Now last week I looked at the Highland Park 15, and that is one of these whiskeys that critics tend to overlook it a lot, and it's partially because it's like the redheaded stepchild of Highland Park. Almost all of Highland Park's offerings are done in Spanish oak casks, and that gives them a little bit of a spicy flavor. But the Highland Park 15 and 21-year-olds are done in American oak, and it gives them a very different flavor profile. So unfortunately they've been discontinued, but I understand why. Although I personally find them delicious, they don't really fit with the rest of Highland Park's range. And just tasting them, you wouldn't necessarily be able to guess that they were made by Highland Park, because they just have a very different flavor profile. So anyway, today I'm looking at the top of Highland Park's standard range, and that is the 18-year-old. So it used to be the 12, 15 Dark Origins, and then the 18, and I believe it's now updated, both the 15 and Dark Origins being discontinued. It's going to be the 12 Viking Honor, the Valkyrie, and then the 18-year-old. And the Valkyrie, I believe, is the first of a new series where once a year they're going to be releasing kind of this way Glenmorangie does their private editions. The Valkyrie is going to be a limited release, and it's going to be replaced by something else next year. So you may be wondering why I already have my whiskey poured, and it's because with older whiskeys, and depending on the whiskey, but most older whiskeys need time to breathe in the glass. So the general rule of thumb is like 1 minute per year. And I find that to be a pretty good approximation. So I've let this sit here, for about 10 minutes or so, and I don't need to let it sit quite as long because it's already, since the bottle is mostly empty, it's already decanted in the bottle a little bit. And just right away, I want to go ahead and mention this is bottled at 43% ABV. That may be different if you're in Europe, but at least in America, 18-year-old is at 43% ABV, along with all of the rest of Highland Park's offerings. I don't think any of them are below 43%, some are even higher. So I appreciate that Highland Park does that, and they do use natural color. So we know that this is 100% nothing artificial in here. Now you might be thinking this doesn't look very dark for an 18-year-old, and in fact, if you look at this right next to the Highland Park 12-year-old, it's hardly any darker. That's because whiskey gets most of its color in the first few years of maturation, and also because this isn't using very many first fill sherry casks. Although this is aged exclusively in casks that previously held sherry, most of them are second fill barrels, and I believe the ratio is about half and half. Some people say like 60-40, but it is more first fill than the 12-year-old, but it's still not that much, or else you would have a much darker color here, closer to a Macallan. So we're going to go ahead and see how this smells. Wow. So immediately you get that aroma that people love Highland Park so much for. It's that soft, gentle peat, a little bit of a heather florality to it, mixed with some really nice sherry notes. There's raisins and cherries. There's a little bit of milk chocolate even on the nose. It's really, really nice. There's some spice, some oakiness showing through in the back. But the main thing that makes Highland Park 18 smell so good, and I could literally just sit here and smell this all day, is the balance. When you have a Macallan, for instance, the prominent flavor that they're going for is that sherry. They're not really trying to balance it out with the other flavors that can be present in a whiskey. They're going for that heavy, heavy sherry flavor. And very much the same way that Laphroaig or Lagavulin may be trying to just go for that really smoky flavor, Highland Park really balances the wood, the peat, the smoke, the sherry, all very well. And it makes it really harmonious, actually. It's no one of those aromas is overpowering the others and taking over. And even if I let this sit another 10 minutes, these aromas are going to change to pears and apples and honey, more so than sherry and raisin. So we're going to go ahead and see how this tastes. It's got a really nice full mouthfeel. It's very smooth, very warming. There's a lot of sherry on this. The peat comes in along with the oak and gives it a slightly dry mouthfeel, but it's not too dry. Some older whiskeys around 21, 25-year-old can get very, very dry on the finish, but this is right at the point where you can feel the age in your mouth, but it's not feeling too drying. And the sherry is very full, very well balanced against the peat. You know, those flavors, neither one is overpowering the other one, and there's even a little bit of chocolate on the finish too. So this is very complex whiskey, and even as you let it sit in your glass, taste it, it's going to evolve over time. Now, the one thing I want to caution those of you who haven't bought maybe some older whiskeys before is that because they do need time to open up, and this can be true of some younger whiskeys as well, the first few glasses you have out of a bottle are going to be much less flavorful and a lot of times disappointing relative to once the bottle gets maybe 3/4 full or halfway full. And that's because I've found that most whiskeys change for the better as they're exposed to air a little bit in the bottle. And that's not always true, but a lot of times it is. And I've had many whiskeys, this one included, where when I first opened it, I was very disappointed, but now it's really exceptional. So the problem that this whiskey has is that it costs $125 to $150, depending on where you live. And that's really quite pricey. That's not too expensive for an 18-year-old. The Highland Park 18 does tend to be maybe $20 more than most of the other brands 18-year-olds, but it's still nowhere near a Dalmore or a Macallan in terms of the markup that you're paying for a brand. So do I think it's worth it? That's tough. For a score, I would give this 94 points. Even though it's expensive, it's very, very good. But whether or not I think it's worth it is going to be up to you. If you love Highland Park 12-year-old, this is going to be right up your alley. You're going to love this. Personally, I don't know that I would spend another $150 on this bottle. If I found it for $100 to $120, absolutely, I would buy this again. But if it was more expensive than that, it's going to be hard to justify, because at that point you can get 3 bottles of the 12-year-old, and it's not $100 better than the Highland Park 12-year-old. So that's going to be up to you. And if you like this review, please subscribe to my channel. That helps me out a lot. Check out my review of the Highland Park 15-year-old that I did last week, and make sure to come back next week for more reviews. Thanks for watching.